Marissa.
Hello, we're live.
There you
Sorry,
go.
we had a little technical glitch there. Usually there's a little intro with a little speech, but that's okay. We will go on the fly.
No
Welcome
problem.
to tonight's episode of Fertility Village Live. We're so glad that everybody's here. I'm Marissa, and today we're diving into a topic that so many people navigating family building need more clarity on with one of my personal favorites, Sara Cohen. So we're going to deep dive today into the legal and medical considerations around surrogacy, third-party reproduction, egg donation. As we know, these paths can be very overwhelming, layered, emotional, and can be confusing. And so understanding the legal framework is one of the most important parts of protecting yourself, your surrogate, and ultimately the child. So I'm very, very honored to welcome tonight's guest, Sara Cohen, one of Canada's leading fertility and family building lawyers and the founder of Fertility Law Canada. Sara is an incredible, knowledgeable, deeply passionate, and someone whose insight has helped countless intended parents, surrogates, and donor-conceived families feel informed and empowered. Thank you for being here, Sara. We're so lucky to have you. Let's just jump in.
I first have to say thank you to you as well, and right back at you, one of my very favorite people who are blow my mind at all the good you're doing in the fertility world. So I'm happy to have you, but we're happy to have you in this space.
Ditto. So let me, for us people that don't know Sara, don't know who you are, can you start by introducing yourself, who you are, what your life is like, and the work that you do at Fertility Law Canada?
Sure. So my name is Sara Cohen. My practice is Fertility Law Canada. From a professional perspective, I've been doing this area of law for 15 years, which really dates me and makes me feel old. And I've worked with, I think it's now more than 3,500 people involved in these third party. Yeah, it's so many. I'm so lucky when I think of, I'm so full of gratitude when I think of, like, even if I played a tiny role in one person, it's amazing. But a tiny role with so many people, it's like, honestly, it's like blow my mind. I'm really just so grateful. So professionally, this is all I do all day, every day. So mostly surrogacy, but also egg donation, sperm donation, and embryo donation. And I would like to believe I'm more than professionally. So I am married. I have 2 kiddos who I am deeply in love with. And I think that also gives me a lot of understanding about how, if I can potentially share that with someone else, like even an itsy bit, like I want that for everybody who wants to be a parent.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so what did you ever practice any other law, and how did you find your way into the fertility and family building law space? Like, was there like a specific moment, or was it a slower transition? How did that happen?
It was a bit of both. I mean, before I was, let me start that again. When I was an undergrad, I did a little bit of work at one of the fertility clinics, and I was what is called doing research, which really is honestly was data entry for some research project. But I just completely loved it. I thought it was so cool. And then I spent a summer at Princeton University's Office of Population Research doing some research about contraceptive technology and other reproductive rights. And then when I was in law school, the Assisted Human Reproduction Act was coming in, and I really didn't like parts of it. So I wrote every single paper I could on the topic. I mean, like, you name the course, I took it and I wrote about this. And I wanted to be a fertility lawyer immediately, but I was like, I don't know how to start a law firm even, or how to run a business. So when I came out of law school, I was what I call a regular lawyer. I was a commercial litigator on Bay Street for a couple of years. And then I had my own kiddo, and I had some struggles in that regard. And I didn't handle those with, let me put it this way. I don't know how to say this. It was very traumatic for me, is the best way to put it. I found it very traumatic, and it kind of just brought back to mind. It's like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people have babies to the extent I can. I've always thought third-party reproduction done well is really beautiful. And then when it was time to go back to work after maternity leave, I was like, I'm not leaving my kiddo to do something that's not particularly like meaningful to me. It was interesting, it was challenging. But if I'm going to like not be with him like all the time, I want to be doing something where I feel like I'm really helping people.
Yeah.
And then I started doing this and I got so lucky because my practice it built really, really fast. And a lot of it is just right place, right time. So I got lucky and I'm so grateful for my many things in my life, but my professional career is extremely rewarding. And I don't think there's a lot of lawyers you can speak with who are going to say, I love what I do. And I really love what I do.
That's beautiful. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for sharing that. I actually didn't know that whole entire story.
Yeah, sorry, it's a long one.
No, I love it. I love learning why and where people get to where they are, especially in this space, right? There's usually something special that brings you to where you are. It's not like, oh, I woke up one day and I decided to do this. It's usually for a reason. So that's really, really sweet. Okay, nitty gritty. From your perspective, I want you to set the tone for the night here. What feels most misunderstood about surrogacy and third-party reproduction from a legal standpoint, in your opinion?
Ooh, I feel like I could give you a very long list. Um, Part of it isn't legal. Part of it is, I think, as you would say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but as you would probably comment, like there's an entire world, like there's an entire subculture in third party reproduction in
Yeah.
Canada. I also think a lot of the time people spend a lot of time going, well, no one would want to do this if it wasn't for money. And that may be true of some people, but it's not true of everyone.
Yeah.
And I think for whatever reason, sometimes surrogates don't get the respect that they should because they are like blow your mind fabulous people who are willing to do this. So that is something that is misunderstood, the what it takes in someone to do this. From a legal perspective, I think people are tied up in genetics and they think just because they are genetically related to the baby that automatically they're the mom, for example. And that's actually not the case. It's the surrogate is the legal mom. Even at the time the baby's born, even at the time we already have a contract in place prior to the embryo transfer and in every single province. And I think that's surprising to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fact that Quebec is like a no-go zone is surprising to people too. So, I mean, if you're in this world, you've probably heard people say it, like kind of scream it, like do not do surrogacy in Quebec. But I think for people who are maybe new to this world, they wouldn't understand why that is.
It's a whole other world, for sure.
Exactly. It's exactly that.
Okay, well, I think that gives us a good overview of things that we're going to touch on tonight. But thank you. I know that question could go on forever and ever and ever and ever. It could have a million answers. So I appreciate you like trying to narrow it down as much as possible. So we're going to just lightly touch on adoption, then we're going to go back to surrogacy, third-party reproduction. When people are deciding between adoption and surrogacy, not everybody has a choice to make that decision, but if they do have the choice on which one to pursue, what are some of the key legal differences they should understand right from the get-go?
So I first have to be very clear that I'm not an expert in adoption. And if you are looking for an adoption lawyer, I would be very happy to refer you to lawyers who are fabulous. I would love to do adoption law too. I think it's beautiful and a fabulous way to build your family. There's just not quite as much work in that area. And honestly, I would have to learn what I'm doing the way I did here. That being said, theoretically, adoption, in addition to practically, but theoretically, it's completely different because with adoption, there's already a person who is a legal person and has parents, and the legal parents of a child already exist. So you are legally severing that parentage and changing it to someone else. When we're doing third-party reproduction, there's no person who exists. So at the time, if I put away, whether it's religious or other ways of looking at an embryo, we're looking at it as tissue or property, or however, really the law hasn't quite defined it yet, but not a person. And there is no change that way, other than where it gets a little bit gray is how I was saying before, the surrogate is the legal mom, but it's not exactly the same. We don't do adoptions of babies who are born through surrogacy anymore. So it's simply just a declaration of parentage in the provinces that still need any court activity.
Yeah.
So it's not a changed legal status per se. It's more of we're declaring this to be true. The intended parents are the parents of this baby. The surrogate is not a parent.
Got it.
So they're different conceptually.
Yeah, so I guess it changes when there is a child on this earth already earthside. It makes things very different in that
Exactly.
In that regard. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So for intended parents who are considering surrogacy, what are some of the non-negotiable legal steps or protections they would need in place before starting any kind of like transfers? Because we need medical clearance before we go into kind of legal stuff. But what medical treatments do we need to wait for until we get all of our legal stuff done?
So most clinics won't even start a surrogate on medication prior to having the legal contract in place. And the reason is we really don't want to put someone through any medical risk or anything if it's not going to go forward. Thank goodness almost every contract goes forward, but there are some times where people back out, or maybe they're just not on the same page and it doesn't go forward. So prior even to getting a surrogate on medication, other than birth control, etc., if we're just trying to like time her, other than that, really nothing is going to happen until that contract is done. The contract is actually like a lot longer than I think people think. I think, if you're new to surrogacy, you think it's like just going to be a piece of paper that says like my baby, not your baby kind of thing.
Many pages.
It's many pages. And I usually tease my clients that it's so boring. This is going to put you to sleep, but like you've got to get through it, please. So they're like honestly 30, 40, etc. pages long. But if I had to say one thing that had to be in there, it's who is a parent and not a parent.
Yeah.
And where the baby is born is the province that's going to determine how the parentage is going to work. And every single province is completely different. I mean, most of them, we can more or less end at the same result in certain circumstances, but that's not true in every circumstance, and that's definitely not true in every province. So if we had to say just one thing, we would have to meet the requirements of each province and who is a parent, who's not a parent. Thank goodness I'm in Ontario, you're in Ontario. Our law is really great for the most part, and it's about who intended to be a parent prior to the embryo transfer and who intended not to be a parent prior to the embryo transfer. So we deal with that. We also are going to talk a lot about your financial obligations to the surrogate. As I'm going to say for sure people know, but every once in a while people surprise me. It is illegal to pay a surrogate or offer to pay a surrogate, punishable by up to 10 years in jail and or $500,000. Please don't do it. The wowzas, if you ask me, although to the best of my knowledge, no parents have ever been charged, but wowzas. Can I say that on a podcast? Okay.
Say whatever you want. It's real raw and authentic here.
Wowzas. Okay. So yes. So we're going to deal with that. And while you can't pay a surrogate, you are allowed to reimburse her for certain categories of expenses that were set out by Health Canada, but you're not actually obligated to. So in the contract, we're going to usually say, well, this is what the intended parents are going to be obligated to reimburse the surrogate for.
Yep.
And it's a lot of work, actually. You have to get together receipts, you have to fill out certain documents. Only then can you reimburse the surrogate. So we deal with that. But honestly, the contracts are really, really long, and I can talk about them more if you want, but that has to happen. Then what has to happen is it is required in various provinces that the surrogate has independent legal advice. So it's not just, we write it and everyone signed on the dotted line. For example, I can't work for both the parents and the surrogate. In Ontario law, at least, we need the intended parents having independent legal advice and the surrogate having independent legal advice. Okay.
Yeah.
And
that's the same for donors.
It's actually not. So
Oh.
with surrogates, it's actually statutorily required unless you want to have to adopt your baby or something down the road.
Okay.
With donors, it's not legally required, but it's like a really bad idea not to do that. Okay. Because, for example, if I'm writing a contract for intended parents who are doing egg donation, and they say, okay, well, you wrote the contract. The donor says she doesn't need independent legal advice. That's enough. First of all, I can't write the clinic and say, oh, yes, she got legal advice, the donor, because she didn't. So that's one thing. Some clinics wouldn't say that's enough. But there's a reason that there's a group called the Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproductive Technology Attorneys. You have to sign that I will not work on a file where a donor didn't get independent legal advice, because I see it also as really unethical. And I think people sometimes don't necessarily understand what they're getting into and haven't maybe thought things all the way through, that and they need someone who's been in the area and has expertise in the area to kind of explain it to them. Usually they're like, oh, okay, got it, check mark. But they have to have that moment where they go, oh, okay, got it, check mark, right? And it actually doesn't legally require it, but I always tell my clients, if I'm writing it for them, the money that goes to the donor's lawyer isn't going to go for me. And it's going to make my life harder because now I have to negotiate with other lawyer. But please, please, please have her use that other lawyer, because worst case, it's the very best insurance you're going to buy that no one can now say, or the donor is going to have trouble saying, I didn't understand what I was signing, because now I'm going to have a lawyer who signed a certificate saying, I explained this to the donor. She understood. So it's please, please do it. Really.
And so when should intended parents and surrogates each get their own independent legal counsel? Is there such a thing as like too early or too late? I think there's a too late, but maybe not a too early.
Too late. So I'm really lucky that a lot of my clients come to me super early in the process. And I have no idea how other lawyers work. I give a free consultation. And after that, if people choose to hire me, I work on a flat fee basis. So most people say, well, if I'm going to work with you and I'm going to do this, I may as well hire you for the same price at the beginning. And I have to say, I love the law. I'm a big nerd about it. I could talk about it forever. But one of the things that is most special to me is that kind of holding people's hands through this. It's not the same as I'm not doing real estate law, employment law. There's nothing wrong with any of those, but this is different. You're dealing with people who are, it's certainly vulnerable. There's a lot of emotion, and sometimes, it's difficult to navigate, or it's at least different to navigate than maybe one might have expected. Yeah. And so probably one of my favorite parts about what we do is really just the support. So most of my clients hire me once they're like, yeah, I want to work with Sara. Yeah, I'm going to do this. They hire me at the beginning. I think no matter who you go with, which lawyer you go with, speak to someone very early on. I assume lots of people give free consultations. Do it, because you don't want to accidentally have to go backwards. So for example, I told you already now, you can't do, unless you're a Quebecois intended parent, and even then it's a big mess, you don't want to do surrogacy in Quebec. But also, for example, you don't want to do surrogacy in Alberta if we're not using material that's genetic material that's genetically related to the intended parents. So you might not have known that. And now you've got this big, huge problem because you've done the medical screening, done the psychological screening, you're getting all ready to prepare for transfer. And I'm like, oh, hi, actually, we can't do this because we can't make the intended parents the parents of that baby in such a way. So please talk to the lawyers early, whichever lawyer you want, who's amazing. I'm sure that's going to happen. Talk to them early. If you want, then come back later if that makes you feel better, but don't go in blind because you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
So, and the too late is always ugly. It's like,
Yeah, it's never too early, but it can get
no,
too
it
late.
can get too late. And sometimes, well, uh, sometimes people think traditional surrogacy, which is where the surrogate is genetically related to the baby. Some people think that's illegal. It's not illegal. Just most clinics won't engage in it. So
Yeah.
often it's an at-home.
It's just not as common as gestational surrogacy
It's
anymore.
certainly not as common. Certainly not as common, but sometimes people will like do it at home and then they'll like come tell me like, oh yeah, we did this. No, no, no. I'm like, oh, there was no agreement. No, ooh, we have a problem, right? So get people involved early. Plus, there's only 24 hours in the day, so
Mhm.
let's get it done. Let's get it done properly. And the final thing I'll say is people make bad decisions when they're doing things last minute. You become panicked. You're just like, let's get this done, and you're
Do
probably
whatever you can do in the last minute moment.
100%, and you might be agreeing to stuff you never would have wanted to agree to.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Do that.
Medical factors like embryo ownership, number of embryos transferred, use of donor gametes. Do these things impact legal agreements?
Yes. So very much so. So it's actually so interesting because one of my lines that I tell clients all the time is I went to medical school 0 days and you should take no medical advice from me. But it's weird because we operate in a place where obviously we're so not only influenced, but we're dealing within a medical framework usually. So yes, whether it comes down to things that we don't usually contract about, for example, were these embryos PGTA tested? Like surrogates might ask questions about whether we're transferring a euploid or a mosaic embryo, et cetera, et cetera. But even things like we almost always include how many embryos we're transferring at a time. Now we almost always only transfer one embryo at a time, but we talk about things like that. We talk about like if there's any, whether it's STIs or any other health concerns, whether it's with the surrogate or also the intended parents, we talk about these things. Um, it, we talk, I mean, like I don't even, it's just so much of it is on the health aspect of what we do, and it's really interesting because it's the balance that needs to be there where it just has to be such incredible transparency between all the parties.
Yeah.
And so the parents, it's like we're an open book. Here's why we're doing this and here's what's going on, and the surrogate has to be an open book too.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a lot of honesty and transparency from everybody to make this work. And when something of that is lacking, that's when things don't usually go
That's when things go south.
sour. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, in terms of a contract, we're looking at a surrogacy agreement. What should be clearly spelled out in terms of decisions around termination, selective reduction, multiples, pregnancy complications? What are things that need to be spelled out in those regards? We know those are all important, make it or break it kind of things in a contract.
Yeah, and I actually exactly as you're saying, there's not a lot of things where I'd say is like, for me personally, a hill to die on when it comes to when you're trying to figure out who's going to be a good surrogate for you and who you're going to be good intended parents for. But the termination issue for me is up there with probably the hill to die on. Um, just because you lose so much control when you are an intended parent and it's not your body. It might be your baby, but it's not your body. And I know as a lawyer, I will put whatever you want me to put in that agreement as long as it's
Mhm.
legal. And I will most likely, you will, not everyone, but most of my clients say, I want to know that if I ask the surrogate to terminate for a medical reason, she'd be willing to do so. And if she doesn't, then it's a breach of the agreement, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. But I understand very well that we can put whatever you want in this agreement. And if she says to you, you know what, like I meant that when I signed it, but now that we're in this position, I just can't do it. I can't go through with it. Like, what are you going to do? You're not running into the hospital with a copy of the contract and saying, she said she'd have an abortion. Like, no one cares, right? Like,
Yeah.
No one's going to listen to you.
Yep.
So while it's important that it's in the contract, one of the more important parts almost in is the process of negotiating around that. And I would say that's true of a lot of things in a surrogacy contract, because we talk about what kind of screening, etc. And it's the same kind of idea. We could say, yes, I agree to X, Y, and Z screening. I find the surrogates extremely transparent in general, not everyone, but when it comes to things like these are my hard no's on screening. These are my hard no's on selective reduction or termination. And I really appreciate that, because unlike maybe a lot of other areas of law, a lot of it is like we're kind of setting the framework so that if, God forbid, something goes wrong during this, we have a plan. We've thought it out. We've thought about worst case scenario. This happens. What are we going to do? So I think that's really why they're so detailed. And I wish I would say I haven't seen them used that often, but I can say that having a plan has saved so many situations that are extremely high stress, extremely high emotion.
Yeah.
And you don't have that much time to make decisions. Well, these decisions were already made. So it's really, really useful.
They were already discussed and already agreed upon. As you said, anybody can change their mind during, but if you lay the good foundation and you discuss it thoroughly before, and you put it into the contract, you hope that if, forbid, knock on wood, that situation ever arises,
Yes.
you have already talked about it. You've already, laid it out well in the contract.
Yeah. We do things like, if that happens, then we won't continue necessarily reimbursing you for the rest of the contract.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can't force anyone to do something. So that's kind of how it goes. And of course, we shouldn't be able to force someone. It's her body. She gets to decide what goes. It's a very complicated reality in that situation. It really is. But yes, all of those things should be included, and more. We talk about what happens if the intended parents separate or divorce. We talk about terrible things like what if they die during the pregnancy? Where does the baby go? It's at least, I mean, there's a reason they are so vast, and there's just so many things that could go right, and there's also some things that could go wrong that we want to be prepared for.
Yeah. So let's talk red flags. What are some red flags you see in surrogacy arrangements and agreements that make you pause, medically or legally? Things that you've seen, not maybe necessarily that you've put in contracts, but other contracts that you've seen, or people coming to you saying, I want to do this or this or this. Give us some of the...
Boy, I feel like there's so many. For the most part, I do have to say, I'd say like 95% of this goes really well, really smoothly. People are like reasonable and compassionate and all those things. It's the 5% that are the, oh my goodness. So
that's what we want to hear about.
I know it's, there's times where you might have intended parents say some crazy things like, oh, I'm not going to tell my wife I'm doing this. I'm going to use donor eggs and a surrogate, and I'm going to surprise her with a baby. You're like,
oh my goodness.
I know. So you say no, I don't want it. I know. So I would recommend anyone who's approached with that, bad idea. There's I'm not sure how I feel about certain things ethically, but I do think when you're talking about things like ages, there's a big difference between someone who's 50 and someone who's 80 trying to have a baby through surrogacy. And sometimes you see things that you're like, talking about how many embryos we're going to transfer at a time. Sometimes still people maybe push that. Some of the numbers games scare me because, as you know, and I know, it's illegal to pay a surrogate. It doesn't mean, like, people sometimes are like, well, it costs nothing to be pregnant. That's not actually true. If you stop and you think about all the times you miss work because you're going to an appointment, your travel, your extra childcare, all those things. But the kind of numbers sometimes I see, I'm like, I just can't believe it. And that really worries me. So it really does. And it makes me, I'm not actually necessarily against compensated surrogacy if that's what someone wants and we're completely open and honest and it's legal at the time. But where it's illegal, one, I'm worried. I'm a lawyer. I do everything right by the book, dot my I's, cross my T's. But also it's like, I worry about it not being honest or genuine, or what is your impetus for doing this? And that scares me. Sometimes I can be dealing with intended parents in particular who are just so desperate, and they come from a place of such desperation that I cannot believe the decisions they're making. And I mean, there will be times when I say, like, I understand why you're doing this. I really do. And I just really want to explain why I think this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And it's terrible to say that to someone. Um, there's a lot of red flags, unfortunately. I worry about a surrogate doesn't have to be rich. She must be financially stable. It's really, really important. You become completely vulnerable to her when she is pregnant with your baby. She's actually completely vulnerable to the intended parents throughout as well. But from an intended parent's perspective, you're completely vulnerable to her, and I need to know she's financially stable. She's not calling you up, I can't afford to pay my rent, can't afford to pay my mortgage, my car broke down, you need to fix it, like, terrible, you're stressed all the time. I need to know she has support in her life. Perfectly fine if she's single, as long as she's got support around her. Great if she's a stay-at-home mom, as long as she's a partner who's financially supporting her, or she's otherwise financially stable. Sometimes we see people who have had sexual trauma, and that worries me. I'm not a counselor. I rely on people who are counselors very much. I actually put in my retainer, even where it's not required, all my clients work with counselors, because I'm very well aware where my limitations are. But there are people who, if they've dealt with it and they have the support, great. But there are sometimes people, you'll be working with surrogates who are so clearly dealing with trauma, and that's concerning. Sometimes we have surrogates whose kids are with Children's Aid, and they're not raising their children, not because they don't want to be raising their children. So, I mean, my list could go really long, and I really want my message to be that it's more than 9 out of 10 that I see. We're really at a 95% where things go like nice and smooth.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Do make sure. I mean, there are lots of things to make sure about. Sometimes I find contracts, one of the way the lawyers get in the way sometimes, all of us, myself included, is we're like the least fun part of it. Nobody likes us, right? So you're dealing with all the
word to deal with all this legal jargon and
like, here's if we do something really bad or you do something really bad, here's what happens. It sucks. It's all like worst case scenario. So I really think we try to be collaborative about this, and at the same time we have an obligation to take care of our clients. So if we see something that's like, this is a little weird, or what they're asking for here, I'm noticing this is making me a little nervous. Are you aware this is out of the ordinary in a significant way?
Yeah.
And are you comfortable with what you're being asked to do? Are you comfortable with what she's telling you she is willing to do? And sometimes even just things that maybe aren't so out of the ordinary, but are a bad match. Like, sometimes I'll have, like, if you've got a client who's an intended parent, who's maybe a doctor, or maybe they're into traditional medicine, and they found a surrogate who wants to give birth at home, wants a midwife, absolutely refuses to do like testing or whatever. Like, you've really got to think about how the next 9 months are going to go, because it's probably going to be a struggle.
Yeah. Unless you're of the same mindset and you want,
if you're into it, go for it.
But if you're not into it and you're just desperately jumping into it because you don't see another option, it's probably not
a desperation. It's a desperation. Oh, and by the way, sometimes people will work with surrogates who aren't citizens of Canada and aren't even like permanent residents of Canada, but might be here on like a student visa, or this is a very bad idea, don't do it. So it usually, what it comes down to, Marissa, is people making desperate decisions.
Yeah.
So sad.
And this is like where the vulnerability comes in, right? Everybody's so vulnerable. Everybody wants to do something nice. I don't think anybody goes into this with horrible intentions, but things might get blurry and lost along the way. And it's really hard when you're in these journeys. They're complex, they're multi-layered, right? There's so many things that go into one of these, just one journey. So yeah, there's a lot on the line. So I could see how things can spiral very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go in a little bit, touch on donor gametes and embryos. How do things change legally when donor eggs and donor sperm or donor embryos are involved in a surrogacy scenario? So like you are adopting embryos or you're adopting eggs, but then you're putting it into a surrogate. You're not necessarily carrying them yourself.
So first of all, we don't use the word adopting when it comes to a not person for the reason you and I spoke about before. We adopt a person because there is a person to adopt. But embryos, there's not a person, depending on, you might feel different, not you, but one might feel differently because of maybe religious beliefs.
Yep.
But in general, the idea is that it's not a person, that's material, and that's why it's donating. We're donating it. Same with an egg. I think we can all agree an egg is not a person, and we're donating the egg to someone else. It's material. From a surrogacy perspective, it doesn't change much.
Yep.
Other than there are some places like Alberta, for example, where at least one intended parent has to be genetically connected to the fetus in order to make the intended parents the parents of that child. Some place like Ontario, British Columbia, etc., it's very malleable, it's very flexible. So it's whoever intended to be the parent is the parent, whoever intended not to be a parent is not, has nothing to do with genetic connection. The law that's so interesting around donation is simply about, it doesn't really touch on surrogacy. It's simply about like who is a parent with sperm donation, egg donation, and embryo donation. And that's really changed a lot over the past number of years since I've been doing this, which is not as short as it might feel to me. And the law really, really improved already like 8 years ago. So, for example, Ontario's legislation changed January 1st, 2017. It literally says a donor is not a parent. But we also allow 1 parent, 2 parent, 3 parent, 4 parent families, etc. So they could all be parents together. So we have to be clear this person's just a donor. But what I'm trying to get at is, especially when it came to sperm donation, that was the really dangerous one, because there was this old-fashioned idea, which obviously like we're way past that, which was you always knew who a mom was, but you didn't always know who a dad was. So the dad was about genetics. With an egg, it wasn't really, we weren't so worried about the genetics. With donor sperm, we were worried about genetics. Yeah. And so this legislation really made things a lot better. So in places like Ontario, British Columbia, et cetera, it has nothing to do with the genetic connection anymore, which I think is fabulous. I think like we're long past that in terms of, or many of us are long past that in terms of having this belief that you need to be genetically related to your child for you to be their parent. I just don't hold that to be true. And at the same time, I recognize that donor conceived people have their own, probably the most valid perspective out of all of us in this scenario, and we need to hear what they have to say. And for some people, that genetic connection is really important. I am not worried about a child turning around and saying, well, that's my parent, that's my mom, that's my dad. But some people need to know identifying information. They need to know. They want to know who they're genetically related to. They want to know health information, and they simply want to know. And I think we need to listen to them. We have the opportunity now.
And so what should intended parents understand about future identity rights for donor conceived children and people from sort of a legal perspective?
So currently, donor conceived people everywhere in Canada, actually with the exception of Quebec, which is like always an outlier, there is no registration. There is no registry in anywhere else in Canada that keeps track of who is an egg donor, who is a sperm donor, embryo donor, which kids are related to each other, like etc. health information. There's nothing. And I think people would be surprised about that. I think people think like, well, my child could like call up the clinic and get this information, or and I don't That's just not true. Your child has no legal right to this information. You have no legal right to this information unless you contract for it. I feel very strongly about using known donors. I don't necessarily mean like your sister's your egg donor, although that's great. It doesn't have to be your cousin, your friend, etc. It could be a donor you meet through an agency. It's perfectly legal in Canada to do that. I don't have a problem with that at all, and I think that's just fine. But there's a reason I think known donation makes such good sense. One, we don't know this donor conceived person and how they're going to feel if they really want to know who the person is.
Yeah.
This way you can tell them. If they don't want to know, you don't have to tell them. If they don't care, they don't care. A lot of the kids don't care, and some do. But then also, I really worry about these kids who are all related to the same donor being within the same somewhat community, or at some point crossing paths and really having sex with each other. We're worried about that.
Yeah.
And then we're worried about if there's health information, we want to be able to share it. I also want to keep track. If it were up to me, I'd want to know how many times someone donated within a certain population, and I want to keep track of those things. So the part that I think people would be surprised about there is these donor conceived people just don't have any rights in Canada to any of that information.
Yeah.
I also don't like, sometimes agencies will say, oh, well, if you do something with us called open identification, sorry, not open identification, they might call it that, but usually they call it semi-anonymous or semi-known, then the donor conceived person can reach us when they're 18 years old and we'll tell them who the donor is. Like, I feel so bad when people rely on that, because I just don't believe that agency is going to be here 20 years from today. I just don't. So I think that you may as well be choosing an anonymous donor at that point. I think it's really an education thing and a legal protection thing, so that donors know they don't have to be scared that they're going to be asked for child support, because they're not. They're protected. We've got legislation like in Ontario, they're protected. We know that donor conceived people aren't like hunting down who the donor is and like, knocking down their doors, etc. That's not the reality. And I think if we could really normalize donor conception and appreciate and value it, and have the legislation already that we do in many provinces about the donor is not a parent, and we don't have to be afraid of, the parents don't have to be afraid, and the donor doesn't have to be afraid, well, then maybe we can start having some more conversations that really make everyone more comfortable in this area, and we can really push Canada in a way that is maybe a little bit more child-centered in our decisions. That being said, for all the things we like to make fun of, in the United States, for example, there's a whole bunch of states that are actually prohibiting now anonymity when it comes to donor conception. So we always like to think we're like so much more advanced in these ways, but like California now has new legislation, Colorado has legislation, I think Washington State does, and like we don't have any legislation here that deals with that.
Yeah. We should.
We should. I agree with you.
Yes.
I agree with you.
Okay, and so obviously you can't eliminate all the risk in all of these journeys for both parties, right? For surrogates, for intended parents, for donors, but you can obviously reduce it. I think one of the things that we've already chatted about is having your own independent legal counsel.
Yeah.
That is one of the ways that you can reduce some risk. What are other ways people can legally protect themselves without expecting perfection? Because perfection is unrealistic.
That's unrealistic. But I think there's so much that goes into it. So, first of all, yes, you need independent legal advice, but please work with a fertility lawyer. The hardest files are when maybe I'm representing parents and the surrogate is like, decides she loves her real estate lawyer and that's who she wants to represent her, and it's like, please don't do that. It's just so hard, because then you're teaching someone on the job and they don't know what they don't know. So please work with a fertility lawyer and don't be a guinea pig. It's the worst. So anyways, there's so much you can do, but I will say I like to believe that I'm a reasonably big part of that, but so is everyone else. It's a really collaborative experience. So counselors play a huge role in this. And I'm relying on my clients to have worked with a good counselor who has done a good psychoeducational component in this, because that is outside of my area of expertise.
Yeah.
And I'm relying on the doctors to have really truly gone over all the risks with the surrogate and the risks with the intended parents so that everyone's clear. And same with donors as well. And then the part that I can do is the two parts is the contracts, and I do those across the country. The part that I don't do across the country is once a baby's born, I only do the part that gets the intended parents on the birth certificate, and or if they need a court order for whatever reason in Ontario. Other
Yeah.
than that, I don't do that part, and I just refer elsewhere. But like, there's a lot of things to it. One is be prepared. Do not do everything last minute, of course. Please work with a fertility lawyer who's done this many, many times. For work with that counselor. Have your counselor talk to your lawyer. We sometimes work in silos, and it's so silly because you might be speaking to someone, Marissa, and you've had X conversation, but it doesn't help me because I can't protect my clients if I don't know about it.
Yeah.
And it's really important that people do that. I like to tell my clients that I want them to work with people who are going to say no to them. So I want them to work with a doctor who's going to be willing to say, no, this doesn't look like a good idea. This, I'm worried about the surrogate for X, Y, and Z. I want them to work with a counselor who's going to say, no, I just don't think she has enough support in her life. They're not actually, the counselor's usually not going to be like, hard no, they can't. But red flag here, yellow flag here. I want someone who's not just checking the boxes. And that's also my job. I think the biggest value I can bring is a lot of it's just the experience, being able to say, I can smell if something's off here.
Yep.
And I know everyone's contracts really well. I know when something's weird, it's out of the ordinary. I know when someone's asking for something that it just feels strange, and I definitely haven't seen it before, or it's financially so far out of the norm, or is, sometimes people are asking for things where it's okay to say yes, but you have to understand it for what it is. And what is the psychology behind it? Why is the surrogate saying for 45 minutes the baby's going to lie on her chest, and the intended parents can't be in the room for those 45 minutes, the first 45 minutes of the baby's life? And like, if you're okay with that, okay. But
Yeah.
like, have you thought these things through? And then the real legal protection about parentage is just, you got to do it properly. And the other piece is not only because the statute requires certain ways for you to get it right, but at the end of the day, that surrogate has to sign off that she doesn't want to be a parent. And
Yep.
I don't believe she's going to want your kiddo. Just
No.
surrogates do not try to keep kids. They don't. Thank goodness in Canada. Haven't seen it happen. But man, if you guys are arguing and having a hard time, can your life be difficult if we can't all come together and sign these documents either that way?
Absolutely.
So part of it is like the legalities, which are really important to make. I mean, at the end of the day, if I had to say there's one thing, my job is to make the intended parents the parents and the surrogate not the parent. But I really don't think most people would see me as doing that. I think it's like I'm so involved, so much more involved than that. And especially with a lot of my clients, and especially the first time they do surrogacy. And that there's just so much that goes into it that isn't just about who is a parent, but how we're going to make this a successful journey that's good for the parents, have ideally a healthy baby who has this beautiful story about how they got here. But I only feel good about being part of surrogacy when we also are able to say this was really fulfilling for the surrogate. She feels great about what she did, and she really helped someone, and inside she's feeling like this was a wonderful thing in her life. So that's the ideal.
Go both ways.
Completely. And I often tell them, like, why would she do this otherwise? She's got to feel good about it. She really does. And she deserves to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now jumping a little bit more into the emotional and ethical layer of things from a lawyer's perspective. How do you hold space for this, for the emotional side of this work, while also having to be a lawyer and like the legal presence when you have intended parents or surrogates, just, having a hard time with this. How do you do that?
Oh, it's so hard because one, I'm not a counselor and I don't have any special training in
But
this,
I
but I'm
feel
a
like
human being.
sometimes
Yeah.
you will hear a lot of what a counselor
Oh,
will also hear.
I'm sure I do. So the reason I say it's hard is because I don't have the training, but I am a human and I care very much about these people. And often it's people call me who aren't my clients also
Yeah.
and are like, I'm a surrogate and I've had this awful experience, or I'm intended parents and I'm going through this. And honestly, sometimes I just need to talk, and that's okay. And I think like part of the reason I'm so lucky with the work that I do is I actually love it. So because I love it, I want to be there for people. I'm not some perfect angel, trust me. Like I can be, definitely not, but I really truly have so much empathy and compassion for people who are going through this that I want to be there for them. And that includes everyone involved in like whether it's a donor or a surrogate or the intended parents.
Yeah.
And the idea of holding space is usually if someone is my client and something is really up, I just give them like, I usually say, don't call me on my cell phone because I'm never going to answer, but you can text me and then we can go back and forth and call if necessary. Because at that point, like emails aren't doing, and saying let's set up like in 3 days a meeting isn't doing, right? Like they just need to know they can reach me and I'm there. Sometimes it's just knowing that I'm there that makes people feel
Knowing that they
more
have somebody in their court and on their side.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes I say crazy things that I mean, but like I will be like, if you, for whatever reason, like there's an ice storm, whatever, someone couldn't, like, I will be there to get your baby if I have to. It's never had to happen. But like, I think knowing someone has got your back.
Yeah.
And something that's special about being a lawyer here is a doctor has the parents and the surrogate as a patient. A counselor usually has the parents and the surrogate as their clients. But for me, it's just one or the other. So I'm like all in with like, if
And
I'm
I
working,
actually can confirm that because when my son was born and he was sick, you actually said, "Can I come over and bring you something? Let me know if
I
you
was told no.
need there." Yeah, because we were under strict quarantine, but I can definitely confirm that you try to be there at every single
Oh,
step, which is wonderful. Our relationship didn't just end when we signed that contract and we signed the parentage. It was spanning beyond that. So I can definitely confirm that.
that's so nice. I was looking at an email today from clients that just happened to come up because, you check your Outlook or whatever it is, and you check the name. And I had another client with the same name, but this picture came up of their baby, yada, yada, yada. And the last time I spoke with them was like 6 weeks ago and they weren't getting any sleep. So I started writing them back like, oh, is everything like better? You're getting, and I'm like, maybe I should let these people come to me if they want to ask. Because at some point you've kind of got to like draw that line and be um, like let them move on in their life. And I'm here, but like you don't need me anymore. But
But
it's
it's
really,
nice. I see what you
I
mean. Like you had a
care.
relationship with them and you want to see how life
Yeah,
is after,
crazy.
right?
And my favorite part is like getting invited to the birthday parties and stuff like that, because it's not just that moment when the baby's born. It's like they're a person and they have grandparents and cousins and friends and teachers, and they get in trouble sometimes and they hate broccoli. Like there's a whole person here.
Yeah.
And
Just
and
normal kids like any other kid. Yeah.
and like that is like the miracle, really. It's
Yeah.
not just this one moment, it's a miracle.
If somebody watching this is just starting to think about surrogacy and feels very overwhelmed, what's the first step you suggest from a legal perspective? What would you tell them if you could?
I would have them talk to a lawyer. Like, there's lots of us who are good. Choose
Yeah.
someone and get that free consultation. Or if someone makes you pay, whatever, just talk to a lawyer, because you don't know what you don't know. You don't want to make a misstep. I think everyone assumes, like, some people are shocked that you can't pay a surrogate and, like, don't offer to. You need someone to tell you. And then a
How
lot
do
of,
you know if you don't know? How are you supposed to know?
exactly, you've got to talk to people who are in this. I mean, I do obviously I think clinic is like can't do anything without the clinic. And unless you're already with a clinic, I'm not sure that needs to be your first spot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I usually have my clients, and many of them just do juggle a lot of balls at the same time. It's like you got a lot.
Multitasker supreme.
Pardon?
Multitasker supreme.
Supreme. I tell people like you're like the general contractor here. You've got it's crazy.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. So
we
I mean,
what we need to do.
I can only imagine like the checklists you must have, and it's a big project management skill. It really is. Yeah.
What's one thing that you'd like intended parents, surrogates, and also donors to remember from this conversation? Something that they could take away with them, and it might be different for each person.
My biggest thing is for intended parents that like this really is possible. So I think people almost don't believe that this could actually be real, and it's really, really, truly real. So I can't promise it's going to work. I can't promise anything, but this really can and does happen all the time. It's not like a one-off. You're not alone. You should know that. The law is so much better than it used to be. You can do it very safely in Canada. You can be very safe through this. The gestational surrogates aren't trying to keep your baby. You will be the one. You have to go through a process, but you'll be on the birth certificate. There will be it will just be you are the parents. No one else is the parents. That's it. Done. The surrogates, I think, as I've said, like not everyone is a perfect angel, but like from the bottom of my heart, I'm like so moved and so touched, and still can get extremely emotional that there are people who will do this for other people. We're in, the socioeconomic realities of Canada, and yes, it's not perfect whatsoever, Canada, but our realities are very different than a lot of places around the world, and that people are just like don't have to do this. It's not that financially their life is not going to be completely different or anything like that. And this is a beautiful thing. I'm extremely grateful and extremely moved all the time. And what would I like them to hear? You had asked before about whether surrogates, when they need a lawyer, we usually only really see them with a lawyer once the draft is ready from the intended parents lawyer. In a perfect world, it wouldn't be bad for them to speak a little bit with the intended parents. With a lawyer of their own before the intended parents are ready with a draft, just to make sure you kind of get this and you know what this looks like, so that, because I think there's a lot of assumptions, and I guess for people like you and all the other advocates in this space, thank you. I'm so grateful and I'm so excited, and as someone who's been doing this for a long enough time, I can really see the progression in terms of the conversation we're having in Canada and around the world about surrogacy. And it is so wonderful. We've just come so far.
We really have. It's very interesting to see. And I feel like every month there's more conversation, or there's something different, or there's a new panel, or there's something new that people are trying to do. And I think it's just really wonderful that it's not the talk, before used to just be about adoption. And now it's like adoption and infertility. And now it's infertility and surrogacy and third-party reproduction. Like everything is getting good, equal consideration when it comes to the whole world of infertility. It's not just infertility, right? So it's very lovely to see that there are more resources, there are more people speaking out about it, there are more people sharing their stories, and just more community for people that are here, so that they know that they're not alone, right? They really are alone.
It's a beautiful, amazing, powerful thing. And just to you, thank you, because you've played a big role in that, in the surrogacy conversation in Canada over the past number of years. And there's a bunch of people who really have made a difference in this conversation. And I'm just slow clap, loud clap, the whole shebang. It's great.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's because we all love it, right? you included, you love it, and you're passionate about it. And this is why we do what we do. Like, we don't have to be here at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night doing this, but we do it because we love it and we want to help people in the community, and we just want to be there for them. Like other people were there for us at those times. So, Sara, this conversation has been amazing. Huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise and giving us clarity on so many things. Where can people find you or learn more if they want to work with you or follow your work? Where can we find you? And we'll put it in the details of this episode.
Awesome. You can email me. Remember, my name doesn't have an H though. So Sara at fertilitylawcanada.com. It's like the longest ever. If you go on my website, there's a 647 number, which is, you can text me on that and it goes to my cell phone. So if you need something, you can do it that way. And I have an awesome assistant that you can email to, and she'll help you arrange a time to speak with me if you want.
Yes. And if anybody needs help with that, you can let me know and I can connect you as well.
I think I'm supposed to say you can find me on Instagram at Fertility Law, but like, honestly, just send me a text message. But yes, you can also write me on Instagram.
You can also follow her at Fertility Law Canada on Instagram.
Just at Fertility Law on Instagram.
It's what?
Just at Fertility Law. There's no Canada.
It's not Fertility Law Canada? You're right. No. You're right. Because I just tagged you in something today. Yes. So make sure to follow Sara at Fertility Law on Instagram. And follow us here on Fertility Village Live so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Sara, thank you so much again for being here tonight and answering all of our pressing questions and sharing your story and your passion for third party and building families. And to everybody watching, thank you again for spending your evening with us. We will see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Take care and good night.
Thank you so much.